Good evening. What we've been looking at is throughout the entire process of the lockdown, trying to understand the changing nature of the public experiences of the different regulations. So we have been monitoring it continuously since the 13th of April. And we've analysed it, as you've indicated, in three kind of phases, typically on a week-by-week basis. So we can actually see the evolving pattern of attitudes and preferences as over time and with key policy decisions as they're taken. So in the case of the tobacco ban, we've got a sense of how those attitudes are beginning to change or not. So that's what we've been monitoring and understanding the pattern of support and opposition for the extension or the lifting of the ban.
I really want to hear how people feel about the tobacco ban, because sometimes the loudest voice doesn't represent everybody. So just tell us what you found about who supports the tobacco ban. I believe you found sharp differences in terms of economic groupings and also along racial lines.
Yeah. Firstly, on a national average, we found only 18% of South African adults favoured the unbanning of cigarettes. So the majority do support the decision that was taken by the National Command Council. And there are those kind of differences that you're referring to, particularly stark along race, class, etc. So we find that 18% changes quite dramatically when you take that into account. So, for instance, those that have an income of 20,000 rands or more a month, that support for unbanning cigarette sales jumps up to 35%, whereas those with less than 2,500 rands a month are as low as 16%. Similarly, along educational lines, we find an educational gradient ranging from 15% support for unbanning amongst the least educated up to 31% amongst the most educated. And thirdly, the issue about the racial differences, and I think that reflects the underlying class divisions that I've referred to. So we find that 11% of black African adults supported the unbanning of cigarettes. That goes up to 33% amongst coloured adults, 28% Indian adults, and as high as 51% amongst white adults.
Okay, so that's raw data, that's interesting. How do you interpret, what does that tell you, that people who have more money tend to smoke?
I think it's generally, there's the issue about not that they tend to smoke more. There's various reasons for this differential support. We've heard a lot in recent days about illegal trading in cigarette sales, and to some extent that's coming through. So some of the support for unbanning cigarettes comes from those saying, well, it's happening. We're seeing people still procuring cigarettes illegally anyway. So that's one component. We also see that obviously those that are smokers themselves, we're seeing those voices come through, and people wanting their creature comforts. So I think it's various reasons that seem to inform it. Others are a bit concerned about the constitutional perspective, the issue about feeling that their constitutional rights are being infringed. So we even see that come through in our data as one of the sort of strands of the rationale for wanting it unbanned. So there are various competing reasons why people are favouring the unbanning of cigarette sales.
Did you see similar patterns if you asked them about unbanning liquor?
Yeah, it's actually very similar. So we asked about 12 different 12 different policy options, ranging from food parcels right through to wealth taxes. In relation to alcohol sales, it's very similar. It's 13% support the unbanning of alcohol sales. So it's in a similar range relative to the other 10 policy options that we look at. It's amongst the least supported. So we find alcohol sales, tobacco sales, as well as wealth taxes are not widely supported amongst the public at this stage. And over time, we're seeing not huge shifts in that perception yet. Yeah.
Just a quick one on the changing attitudes towards lockdown. You've done 3 surveys and sort of over each couple of weeks or so. Are people becoming more tired of the lockdown? Are they becoming more frustrated? Or does your survey actually suggest that more and more South Africans are buying into it and understanding the need for it?
Yeah. We see both sets of attitudes come through, and we're still really analysing the trend data in detail, but certainly it does seem that there has continued to be quite strong support for lockdown, but what we're seeing is it's not a distinction between support, this black and white difference between support and opposition. What we're seeing is more a nuanced perspective come through, which is the difference between unconditional support and conditional support. So kind of more favouring of a certain level of relaxation of certain of the regulations, but it's not a complete opposition to the idea of lockdown. Mm-hmm. So we're kind of seeing a fairly even split between the unconditional and the conditional support for lockdown.
Thank you so much. That was Dr. Benjamin Roberts of the HSRC.